So pleased to welcome to the show David Herren. His book, Living the End. What a brilliant title it is. And we're going to really dive into his book. So, David, hello.
Hello, Kate.
It's funny. In reading the book, you even posed this question to me. What should we do if we're experiencing tribulation, persecution? That's part of what you talk is a big chunk of the book. Let's just dive right into it. So, what do you say to that?
I'm going to just quote Jesus. He said, "Stand firm and trust me." Him, that is to say, because a lot of his disciples fled when they got into that situation. They were scared. Who wouldn't be? But even if we're scared, he said, just have faith, stand firm, and he will show us what to say. He would just take over if we do what he says. He's amazing. He really is.
And like I said, that's a big part of what you talk about in the book. And then, because of course, again, living with the end, will there also be a pre-tribulation rapture? Because there was a lot of conversation about of heaven-bound saints necessitating maybe a third coming of Jesus.
I researched that so much now that I really do know the answer to that question. The whole thesis was bogus in order to make a lot of money. And the people who did it made a lot of money. They sold books and stuff, but it was bogus. That they quoted things and people and places, and they turned out to be not what they said, or at least that they did not do what they said. These men said they did, and I know why they did it because they made a lot of money out of it. But a lot of Christians have been deceived by that. The key to it was the leader of the pack. He predicted the return of Jesus 30 times. And obviously he was wrong every time. I don't know why anybody would listen to him, but they did. And they still, if you talk to them, they'll say, oh, this guy was blah, blah, blah. Well, he was a false prophet.
Yeah, at least 30 times. Wow. And so you really dove deep into the research, right? I mean, that's the big part. I want to make sure we mention this in this
Yeah,
book.
the way
I mean, you
God
took
set
this pretty seriously.
yeah, the way God set things up was he kind of planted me, and like he planted Tim with me. He knew what we needed because not only the personalities of Tim and I complement each other, but we can help each other out. And both of us have lost our wives, and so I had an extra room. And one day I heard this little boy saying, "Well, what are you going to do with your bedroom?" The next day, somebody called me and said, "Well, there's this guy named Tim, blah blah blah," and that was it. Um, now, what was the question?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. And so that's you know that you were supposed to be together, so he's supposed to be your roommate. And
Yeah,
it's like the question, I didn't say this yet at the beginning because we dove right into the book, which we wanted to do.
right.
But why did you write the book? Why were you called to write this book, do you think?
Oh, from the actually, God placed me in the very beginning, and this book happened to be there. I don't remember even how it was, but this is the book that's the basis for everything. And the first edition came out in 1950. The one I had came out in 55. So, I wasn't very old. But I was reading it while I was still in my 20s. And that was a long time ago. And this book really started people thinking about what's going to happen if blah, blah, blah. And the key if here was, well, suppose one of those comets out there that they come to space, what if one comes and hits the United States? What if it comes and hits the world? And of course, the answer to that question is you're going to have tribulation. You're going to have a big problem because the world wasn't designed to handle something as large as it that has the characteristics of producing fire. And there have been other occasions when we did encounter um, comets that were coming in our direction. And every time, there are several of them in the Bible, they don't have a word that says comet, but every time you see this event happening that could only be a comet or something, you know, in inner space, outer space, what do you want to call it? But that's really happened several times. But the other times, it was much more controllable because they were small. This time, when you read the scriptures, you just get the impression this one is going to be big because this is the event that's scaring people, killing people, scaring them. And of course, God uses that to put them in the situation. Scared people, if you sit down and talk to them, they'll be susceptible to receiving the gospel and to becoming Christians. And it's prophesied in the Bible that at the time when Jesus returns, there will be in the world, well, I don't know the exact number, but it will be 4 billion more than it is now. So you figure what's going to be happening during the end time, those few years, the evangelistic explosion will be just incredible. And of course, that's what really God is after. So many of these people now are learning untruths. They need to hear the truth and be given the opportunity to receive it and to become Christians and go to heaven instead of going to hell. And of course, that all depends upon trusting in Jesus for their salvation. And that's why he came to earth. And when he suffered and died, and he died in our stead, in our behalf. And that's really what the end time is all about, because God loves us. He doesn't want to see people going down here when they could be going up there.
Yeah, and that's the gist of the book. There's no question about that. According to Jesus, should a believer regard persecution for his sake as a blessing or a curse?
Well, that's persecution for his sake is a blessing. Obviously, random persecution is not. But if it's for his sake, if somebody's out there sharing the gospel, and somebody comes along and says, "Okay, I'm going to take you over here and I'm going to beat you to death," that's for his sake. But if it's just somebody who's a hot shot and people don't like him, that's a different story. But there is really a status where persecution is a blessing, because even though at the time we're going to suffer if we go through it, the blessing is eternal. So we're talking about an eternal blessedness in heaven, as opposed to maybe a couple of really bad years on earth. And I'll take that every time.
Yes, absolutely. What will be the prophesied sign of Jesus's second coming? This is a big question and one that people talk about.
Well, I did some research and I came up with 7 possibilities. And then I started to, what traits would they have to have in order to fit this pattern? And none of them, the only one that fit more than half of the requirements was this. I don't know. I don't even know how I got this book, but I'm sure God has something to do with it. Every time I move, just recently, I found this at the top of the pile. It is that good a book. And at the time when it came out, talking about the likelihood that the object of the sign for Jesus' return will be a comet, it was not really even discussed much until this guy comes along and says how much more likely it is to be a comet than anything else. It's more of a logical thing than it is proof. But this man really knew what he was doing. And I like his name. I don't know if you can see it. Emmanuel Velikovsky.
Right, right.
Oh boy, that's a great name for somebody like that.
Yeah. What a great influence for you to then write your book that we
talked
about living.
I was a young man then. I'm still a young man, just a little bit old, but
yeah. But I'm saying what a great influence, and then look at how it leads you are now.
Well, I still have the book.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And it's not even falling apart. It looks pretty shabby, but it's not falling apart. I recommend this book if you can get your hands on it, or if anybody can. You'll be amazed. There's really some great, what's the word I want? Not theological, but factual information.
Factual information that people talk about. Yeah. What will be the most prominent mission for Christians? And this is a very important question too, during the end times.
Yeah, you saw my friend Tim like a little while ago, and a few minutes before we came on the air, or we came on together here for this conversation, Tim and I were talking, and I mentioned to him, I think that what we're doing would be something that Richard would really love to be a part of because he's the evangelist, and the evangelistic opportunities for this are just incredible. So Richard would love to be with us as we walk around. We're going to do that. We're going to walk around and talk about not about the book so much as about Jesus and show the book and well, read this and you can be born again and go to heaven instead of, that kind of thing. But Richard, he's the evangelist of this group. He just, when he sees people, he just thinks, well, how can I share the gospel with them? And they'll pray about it. And then a minute later, he'll be, oh, I got it. I know.
And
It's
right,
not
and
like,
then does it. Yeah.
well, yeah, because the Holy Spirit will show him this individual the way you'd have to talk to them. And I have to pray that way myself. I don't do it enough. But when you have a chance to talk to people about Jesus who can change their eternal destiny, um, it's really important to know how. And Richard is one who does. And I think well, I've talked enough about that, but it is very important for a believer to be able to share the gospel. It's just, well, once you are saved, it's the most important thing that can happen to you is the ability and the opportunity to show somebody else how to go up in heaven when Jesus comes back for the second time.
When, and we're talking, of course, about Living the End, which you can get on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or anywhere where great books are sold with David Herren. And we've talked about specifics of the book and again, the overall arching question of the end and how people feel. And you've said it, you've weaved it into the conversation, but what do you hope people take away from reading your book?
Mostly what we were just talking about, as you know, well, you followed my suggested question because I think that's the most important things about the book is well, what do I want to say? It's taking those subjects and expounding upon them and adding to them. And the more evidence you get, each person is different and will remember something different. But I'm sure that there's something in here for every at least every Christian as far as learning how to share the gospel with others. And if you're not a believer, you should at least wet your feet because when Jesus comes back, we're either going to go up or we're going to stay down, and that's
Yeah,
that's and since it's going to be a very fiery finish, we know that from the scriptures. That's just going to make oh boy.
exactly. The title of your book, Living the End. David, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Kate. I really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun.